Hello, I'm David Glass, Mayor of Petaluma, and we're having a great time visiting various parcels of land throughout Sonoma County. And today we might very well be on the most unique, wonderful setting that many people just simply don't know about. It's kind of a hideaway off of Lakeville Highway, and I'm talking about Keller Estates. And we're with Anna Keller, who is the president of the Petaluma Gap Wine Growers Alliance. Anna, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for being here. We look forward to sharing what we know and love about the Gap.
Let's talk about being president of the Petaluma Gap Wine Growers Alliance. Is this a new organization?
No, the Petaluma Gap has been active for about 7 years now, and originally it started as an enthusiastic group that wanted to start promoting the Petaluma Gap region. I think it's 2011, the Wine Spectator named the Petaluma Gap sourced wine #1 in the world. So it really has brought the attention to what we're growing here.
And you're special because you're not only a grower, but you're a winery. You're the whole thing wrapped up on side of 650 acres of hillside land.
We control the grape growing, we control the winemaking process and the storage as much as possible. So when you come and visit the tasting room, the wines that you'll taste have never left the property. I would say that Chardonnay and Pinot Noir make up 90% of the wines grown in the Petaluma Gap. We're starting to grow more and more Syrah in the Petaluma Gap region, and the cool climate that we have here makes for a very unique Syrah, so I have no doubt that Syrah will see its glory day. Every year we try to add a new component, whether it's adding more olive orchards, whether it's 2 years ago, about 5 years ago, we started our chicken coop. Last year 2 years ago, we started with bees, and so we're always adding something else to our little microcosmos here. Well, the wind has many advantages. You know, from the agricultural side, it dries the vines whenever there's a lot so mildew pressure and botrytis pressure tend to be lower. So from a farming standpoint, it's a little bit more noble to farm around here. We also get very cool evenings, very freezing nights. So that difference in temperatures create a unique microclimate that grows very beautiful, intense wines. We were trying to describe them the other day, and the best way we could say it was they're elegant wines with a touch of the wild. Yeah, we're open Fridays through Sundays, 11 to 4 o'clock, and we're more than happy to have them come enjoy our plaza. It's going to be a beautiful summer. We've got an indoor room, so we'd love to have them here, and they can make appointments online or on the phone.
This property, let's go back into the history of it a little bit, because the Vallejo Land Grant is part of the heritage of all of the Petaluma Gap region. Was this part of the Vallejo Land Grant?
This was part of the Vallejo Grant, and as many of you know, my family originally came from Mexico, and so I always have to explain it. Keller is not a very Mexican name, but my great-grandfather was Swiss, and he immigrated to Mexico. My family established there, and then my father came to the U.S. because he fell in love with an American. So my dad knew that General Vallejo had planted grapes, and being from Mexico and knowing how interesting the General Vallejo story was and how he really developed California in a sense of what a lot of the legacy that he farmed here and everything that he created, it was just a very interesting opportunity for him.
Your father, perhaps you, and perhaps succeeding generations, they have really made quite a project out of studying the history of the region. I mean, this is like a Bible. Tell us about this book and what it is.
It talks about the history of Sonoma and, prior to 1900. The story of Bodwell is here, the story of the maps, the layouts. So
it's a lot of reading, but it is a comprehensive guide to Sonoma County and all the most important family names, from before Vallejo. It tells the whole tale. It tells the story of the Russians, tells the story of Vallejo, all the important family members, included in which is the name Bodwell, who has a really interesting history of his trail from Connecticut to California.
You mentioned Bodwell. Tell us about Bodwell. What is the significance of that name?
Well, this used to be Bodwell's property, and he was a very well-known businessman in our community. He came from New England, so he built a house, and we still own that house. We were trying to preserve it. Agriculture slows us down. It forces us to wait a full year before we understand the results. In our case, we are blessed. We have 3 water reservoirs. One that's dedicated to recreational wildlife. So it's the ducks get it. They are very happy Canadian geese around here. And then the rest we do use to irrigate our vineyards to some extent. These are the ancient seabeds of the San Pablo Bay. heavy clay soils. And anybody and all of us who farm anything in Petaluma, whether it's tomatoes to vines, we know that when that soil cracks, it dries out. So it's very difficult to allow the soil here to dry because it will be very difficult to rehydrate. So we water once, a very long, slow drip throughout in the middle of the summer. This will allow the cracks to seal, and because if the cracks open up, then the roots are exposed to air, and if they're exposed to air, the plant is subject to more disease.
Tell us about gravity flow, because as I understand it, that means that the crop is here and it stays here.
Well, it happens that Pinot Noir really doesn't like to be touched too much. And so when we talk, it's our winery that's designed gravity flow. So we don't have to pump to move from one tank to the other, from tanks to barrels, from barrels back to tanks, to the bottles. So you're moving wine a lot, or juice. And so by being gravity flow, we're allowing wine just to fall from one place to the other without having to pump it and put oxygen into it. And that allows for a slower aging process.
All right, so you look at this area and everything. Was it easy for your father or you or whoever made the decision to buy this parcel, or were there other parcels that came into play that you looked at? How did you arrive at deciding that this was it?
Well, he was the one. Then he knew the property. He knew one of the neighbors at the time. And one day he went down and he was on his way back, and somebody told him, "You know what? I think they're going to sell a property." And so he called up and figured out and drove up to the gate and said, I heard you're selling. And the gentleman said, "Yeah, it's already in escrow." "Well, then you haven't sold."
And when you do this, did he start with the idea that it would become grapes from the very beginning, or was there just something else behind it? Because the lay of the land is spectacular. It doesn't need grapes. It doesn't need anything. You could just take this the way it was when it was created, ever how many millions of years ago, and it's perfect, and it's still perfect. So was that the attraction, or was the idea that this had the wind, as you mentioned, that had the fog, it had the hills, which gives you the variance of temperatures and whatnot? So was it the whole package and said this could be great grapes?
I think it was a whole package. He was intrigued by the question. It was, I always say it's still only 45 minutes away from San Francisco. So back in the early 80s, we could still go to dinner in San Francisco and be back. So it was a very centric point between being in the country while still having some closeness to civilization at that time. It's interesting. Our first attempt at making wine, we called it the Pyramids Winery, because many of our buildings are shaped in the form of pyramids. And we'd go down and they'd say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Pyramids. Would you like to have lunch?" So we decided that was not a really convenient name for our business. And so Keller is our last name, and in Swiss it means cellar. And so it just seemed like,
That's better than pyramids.
That's better than pyramids. So an estate was meant to mean that it was going to be all sourced from the same property. Well, I always say that we're the perfect day trip. You start off in San Francisco, you have breakfast in Sausalito. If you're adventurous, you go to Muir Woods, go there, come to Keller Estate, have a glass of wine, go downtown to Petaluma, visit a beautiful old Victorian town, shop a little bit at the outlets, and then, you can have dinner in Petaluma and be back by 9 in San Francisco. So that, you've got the full wine country experience in our town.
I can tell why you're president of the Petaluma Gap Wine Growers Association, because you obviously love the region, you love the product that you're producing, and the people were right to select you as president.
Oh, thank you. I think what's great about the group is that we all know that we are thinking about 20 years from now.
The celebration that's coming up on September 20th, and people will have a chance to come here and it'll support the Petaluma Museum. I guess the Petaluma Museum is how people can stay in touch with what the past was, and with that realize what the future ought to be.
Well, that's how I came to learn and understand why we were the chicken capital of the world. It was through the museum. So I think it's really important for us, and we're very happy. We've kind of created a very exciting format for the event. We'll be tasting a lot of Petaluma Gap wines. We'll have a lot of people, winemakers. Chris Sawyer is going to be our master sommelier, giving us an explanation on, taking us through the wine country and just really trying to showcase that. And we'll be pairing everything with Preferred Sonoma Caterers, which is Petaluma's #1 caterer. So nothing can go wrong.
I'm David Glass, and it's been nice talking to Anna Keller, president of the Petaluma Gap Wine Growers Alliance, and Jim McCormick, president of the California Wine Museum. My thanks to Kaye Chandler, our producer and videographer, on another episode here. And so until next time, it's been nice talking to you.